G'day expats and welcome to another episode of Expat Chat, episode 105 today, and joined as always by my friend, colleague, mate, confidant, all sorts of titles that we discuss, when we're dealing with these issues. But James Ridley is the Managing Director for the Australian office and specialises in the Asia and Americas region. G'day, James.
G'day, Brett, and good morning. And that's right, I do wear many hats. For those that are joining us, whether you're tuning in via YouTube or tuning in and listening to us via Spotify, podcast, whatever podcasting means have you, I'm joined with Brett Evans, the Managing Director for the EMEA region, also the founder of Atlas Wealth Group. Brett, how are you going in the desert? I hear there's some rain on the way.
There is, and this place always turns into a bit of a shit show when it rains. So like I was saying on the call before, probably a work from home day tomorrow because the roads are pretty crap. When it rains, people can't drive to save their lives. There's 200 nationalities that live in Dubai, of which probably 185 can't drive in the wet. So you imagine that combined into a highway where everyone's doing 120 k's an hour. It's grab your popcorn and sit back, and it's okay if you're not in it, but if you're in it, it certainly raises the pulse. But mate, all good here. Race to Christmas. The place is booming. You never know what's going on in Israel and stuff, up the road. Certainly Dubai Air Show was this week. Record plane orders, record numbers, everything. So Dubai continues to set new records. So, mate, it's all on. But how's things back in Oz?
It's good, mate. It's starting to get to that point where I feel like a lot of businesses, professional services firms, they are in that sprint finish. You're starting to get some emails just giving you the heads up. Hey, this is what's going on, winding down, and then the usual 2-week break will happen. And I think school holidays, it's only 2 or 3 weeks away, to be honest. So it's hard to believe that the whole year is pretty much in our rearview mirror now. It's just remarkable.
It flies. And, I'm just getting used to writing 2023 and then it'll be time to learn how to write 2024. So
I know when certifying things and looking at things, it's a bit like that, isn't it?
It is, mate. It is. So, but look, let's entertain the folks today, give them a bit of education. And today we're going to talk about whether to contribute to super or a mortgage or an investment account or a term deposit.
Yep.
Pros and cons.
Yeah, really good.
And let me just get some caretaking out of the way. All the information we're going to have a chat to you good folks about today should be treated as informational and educational purposes only. Do not treat this as personal advice. This should be treated as general advice. And if you need personal advice, have a chat to Atlas.
That's right, mate. And I mean, a really good topic today, super versus mortgage and then versus investing versus term depositing. But I think it's a really common question that's coming up with a lot of expats, how and where should they be diverting their surplus or investing their capital? And the question comes about because of the associated market volatility. It's whenever you're investing in share markets or property, there's always volatility. That's normal. You probably should be nervous when things have been, 4, 5, 3, 6 years of just consistent returns. Then something's just around the corner. But the last couple of years have definitely been difficult for investors. And right now, because term deposits are starting to yield, a 5% interest rate, and mortgages are now, after the recent rate decision, are just above 6% for owner-occupier. People asking, well, what is it better to do? Is it better to throw more into super? Is it better to pay off or put more on the mortgage? Is it better to put more money into shares, or is it better to put in a term deposit? So, I mean, there's a fair bit going on there. So I guess we can jump into it. Disclaimer.
Already done it.
And then,
yep, tick.
And now let's talk about, I mean, ultimately, whatever you do, you're going to be driven by your goals. Let's be honest. It's, one thing's not going to be right for the next person. Investing in super is not going to be right for someone who has a very large debt and they want to attack it and they've suddenly become very debt averse. They want to wind it down, versus someone who wants to build their own share portfolio, versus someone who's now coming across as being a very defensive and, I guess, very conservative investor. So it really depends. I think if we look at the comparison of super versus mortgage, I think that's a really common one, especially in our industry. What's going to get us the most bang for our buck when it comes to either putting excess surplus on a mortgage versus excess surplus into super. The flat out answer is super. Super is always going to get you a greater return on your money, especially over a 5, 10, 15-year horizon versus putting more down on your mortgage. And the reason for that is whilst you'll slowly be saving a little bit extra on the interest on your mortgage, you're not getting a compounding effect on the savings there. You're absolutely not.
No, it's just an absolute return.
That's exactly right. Absolute return on just the interest rate. If interest rates come down, well, the absolute return for that dollar you're putting down is exactly what your interest rate is, whether it's 5.5% or 6.5%. Whereas within super, you'll get the long-term benefits of historically what superannuation has done. Depending on how you invested, it might be anywhere between 6.5 to 10%, whatever. You're getting, one, the benefits of that. Two, you get to compound those returns. So 6% on 100,000 on 1 year, and then on the second year, it's a lot more, and so on and so forth. And the other caveat to that is, well, super is concessionally taxed. The maximum tax rate you pay on short-term gains within 12 months or income is only 15%. Long-term, it's 10% on capital gains. So when you're only paying that kind of tax, you're getting such a real value on your return versus, say, if you're investing in your own individual name. Now, the spanner that we can throw into that is expats, non-residents. Australians that are living overseas, they fall into this unique category where if they're investing back in Australia and the asset itself is considered non-TAP or non-TARP, non-taxable Australian property, well, that's actually a tax-free asset. So that just means that investing in shares can be quite lucrative for Australian expats residing overseas. They will have some withholding tax apply, depending on the type of income coming from those assets. But ultimately, what we do see, super usually wins out versus paying down aggressively on a mortgage. It always will. Now, you're always going to be driven by your goals, though. That's not a hard and fast rule for everyone. If you're, I don't know, approaching retirement in 1 year's time, it might make more sense to pay out a mortgage. Who knows? I don't know your personal situation. Neither does Brett, unless you're one of our clients. So that's a really important one. But super, especially over a 5, 10, 15-year period, will always beat out on paying down a mortgage aggressively. You will absolutely get more bang for buck by investing through super.
I think the other couple of things I'll add there too, a bit more detail to help the folks play that mental mind map of what's appropriate for them. Liquidity could be an issue. That's the only time that I would disagree with you when it comes to contributing to super. If you do think you'll need that access to funds, then obviously super is like the mafia, once in, never out when it comes to getting your money back. I mean, you virtually have to rock up your own death certificate. But we find that forced provisioning for retirement is a very powerful tool, and a lot of folks will say, "But I'm not going to retire to Australia. I'm going to retire to France or Spain or Portugal or Thailand." Go the next level. Where will you be in 80 years of age? They go, probably back in Australia. So there you go. Super works. The only time we say if you need or you want to be able to draw back that funds for a case of emergency, then certainly putting money off a mortgage will be beneficial, but don't actually pay extra onto the mortgage. Use an offset account. So you do have that facility to be able to draw that money back from a liquidity event point of view. Do not use redraw. We've been on this call both on Expat Chat and also Expat Mortgages. Just a shout out to our other colleague Jeremy, who runs that one with James, Expat Mortgage podcast, everything about mortgages, finance, buying property in Australia. So get on that one. We've gone through a lot of detail as to why, from a tax point of view, you can't use a redraw account. So people just generally flippantly use the name offset and redraw sort of interchangeably. You need to make sure that if you are drawing money back, it's coming out of an offset account, not a redraw account. So to me, that's where certainly folks, we see good intentions paying off a mortgage, but wrong execution by actually paying off the mortgage as opposed to putting on the offset account for that reason. We always joke about we actually don't want clients to pay off their mortgage as an expat. We want to give you the ability to pay off your mortgage, but we actually don't want you to do it. So whether that's ballooning a balance out inside your offset account or paying the minimum payments and then directing it to non-taxable assets, shares, managed funds, ETFs, and those sort of things like you discussed before. Because the benefit of that is it's that, and I always say to clients, you need to look at the net tax position. You pay down your mortgage, you lose your largest tax deduction, which is your interest cost, and then suddenly you're paying 32.5% tax on that positive cash flow. So if you think about it, from a net return point of view, you almost need to take 32.5% off the interest cost to look at that position to what the net is, because that's what you're losing on the on those repayments versus what you'd get in a investment account getting average returns that have been generating for the last 10, 20 years. So it's always comes down to a cost of capital, return on capital, in terms of what you can get for your dollar, in terms of whether you do a term deposit, which, look, the 5% looks appealing. I remember, doing this job through the GFC, and I had clients locking in 7.5%, 8% term deposits for 5 years. The risk was they came out of the equity market and they jumped into this 7, 8% return. And suddenly when they got spat out on the other end, they were out of the market 5 years later. The market had a massive run up and recovery.
Yeah.
And when they came out on a 7 and 8, they're going into a 2 and 3%.
Yep,
so
that's right.
If you look at a 10-year period, half it was at 7, half it was at 2. Not a very good net return.
No, that's right. And I think that's sort of a really good question. And I think it's a common question right now. People are asking themselves, well, am I better investing in the share market, or am I better investing in just a term deposit for the next 12, 18 months, getting, say, maybe 5% just over? I guess, there's always going to be a few questions around that. How long are you investing for? If you're investing for the next 5 to 10 years, well, I think share market would make a lot more sense, because remember, once it kicks out from the term deposit, say in 12 months, the share market could have lifted 10 or 15% by then. We've seen how quickly the share market can turn on a dime, or turn on a dollar, or turn on a coin when there is that whiff of good news that things are looking a lot more positive. A terrific example is actually this week. US CPI figures came out. They were really good. It dropped down greater than expectations. And therefore you had the Russell 2000 lift 5% overnight. That's a different index in the US. That's made up of small to medium caps. Yeah, the S&P 500 do a good run of over 2.5%. That's in one day. Imagine if you miss 10 of those days across 12 months. Well, we can see where I'm leading here. So it just goes to show that, term deposit, it might make sense if you can only invest for the next 12 or 18 months and then you need that capital. That would make sense. But much like with super and being retired, remember, if you're retiring next year, you're not just hitting the stop button and putting everything to cash and then drawing out of it. That super is still going to be invested for the next 25 years as you draw down on it. And a lot of people forget that. It still needs to be invested to get the capital growth, get the dividends that keep supporting you through retirement, seeing you through retirement. When sometimes you can actually be too defensive when you head into retirement, and therefore you're never actually going to get the returns to see you through retirement. And if you're living overseas, that's going to be tough, because maybe you're not going to be able to access things like the age pension, Social Security, which is very unlikely. So that's a really important caveat, that by the time the cash rate drops back down, the share market might have already hit into an aggressive bull and done its run and had, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those really good days, and boom, it's gone. We've missed our opportunity.
I think what people need to realise too is the market's forward-looking. So whilst we look at the numbers today, CPI, unemployment, all those things, what it does, it forms the narrative of what's going to happen in the next 12 to 18 months. So just because the US CPI figures were good, the reason why the market reacted was because they are saying we're at the end of that rate rising cycle. And then the next conversation is rate cuts after that. So it's like sort of, are we there yet? You drive along with the kids. Are we there yet? We're almost there when it comes to the end of the journey of rate rising, which is why the market's reacting. So if you combine the sort of euphoria of rate rises finishing and potentially interest rates deduction starting in 12 to 24 months, you're going at opposite ends if you're on a term deposit to the market. The market's rallying on the back of that, and your interest rate's going down on the back of the other one. The only exception will be is obviously we talk about timing, your chronological time frame of that cash. if you are only investing for 6 to 12 months, TDs are great. If you need that as a deposit to buy a house, then you wouldn't put it in the market at all. Then when you start getting out to 12 to 18 months, that's a different sort of conversation about the level of risk you want to wear. 24 to 36 months, okay, now, equities, makes sense. And then obviously longer term is super. So super, I've got clients in their 20s who contribute to super, and I've got clients in their 50s who don't. It comes back to that conversation before about liquidity. And, some people in their 20s and 30s don't want to be able to pull the money out on a Friday night when on the sauce at the pub. That's why they like super. Whereas those in their 50s are still trying to work out what their pathway looks like leading into retirement. So they want that flexibility of choice. So sitting in money in an investment account makes sense, but you can't leave it there for too long, because then we have contribution limits, age, timeframes and stuff like that we have to take into account. So, I always like to joke with folks I'm meeting for the first time, getting financial advice is like buying a car. Not saying dodgy or anything, but I'm saying, do you want 2 doors, 4 doors, sunroof, yellow, pink, blue, spoiler, mag wheels, like subwoofer? It all comes into what you want. And the thousands and thousands of statement advices we've done over the years, I've never done the same one twice. So whether you choose super or a mortgage or investments or term deposits, it is very personal. For a lot of folks, the answer might be all of the above. It sort of reminds me of that movie, was it Brewster's Millions, vote none of the above. It's the opposite to that, all of the above. So you might be saving, say, 5,000 Australian dollars a month. You might put 1,000 to super, you might put 1,000 off your mortgage, you might put bang, bang, bang. And then you've got 4 silos sort of working for you with different
4 buckets.
Yeah, 4 different timeframes in terms of accessing cash. Shares are liquid as long as the market's open, which it's never not been. Even through the worst times, I was been there for all of them. You can still get your money out within 2 days, settlement timeframes. And then you've got your term deposits, which if it's in a 6-month TD, then you have to wait 6 months. And then obviously you've got your your mortgage accounts. That's sort of, if it's an offset account, that's pretty much instantaneous. And then there's super.
Yeah.
So sometimes, you'll find is you might do all 4 things, but as you get older, the percentage of what you're allocating to different ones will be different. So your mortgage might be almost paid off, so then you start directing more to super. Term deposit rates might be low, so you might direct more to equities. So you always are sort of playing shuffle when it comes to those sort of things.
That's right. Now, I've got clients who they fall into, I guess, a category where, as you said before, they're in their 50s, but they're unsure about when retirement's going to come. So, because they're unsure, they'll take an equal weight approach to handling their surplus. A bit in this bucket, investment, a little bit in the offset just to reduce the interest expense because they might come home soon, and then another bit into their superannuation. And they're doing that because the question mark of, I'm not sure if I'm coming back yet. It might be next year or it might be in 6 years. And it's just like, okay, well, that's hard. And we just need to remain nimble and flexible. So let's take an equal weight approach. So that way we are ticking most boxes there. You're attacking everything at once rather than maybe over skewing yourself in one direction. And that's a really good way to do it. And then, once plans sort of firm up, 12, 18 to, 24 months, I'm definitely coming back. It's like, okay, great. We know what we need to target now based on that and based on your goals. Let's just focus mainly on this one bucket and let's update the other portfolios in the background, something like that as an example. But I mean, when we talk about the argument of, super versus mortgage versus, I suppose, investments versus term deposit. We could probably talk about this, to be honest, ad nauseum, because it just depends.
There's the Excel spreadsheet answer, which is what is the best net tax return on your cash. Then there's also the personal warm and fuzzies. How does it make you feel? Some people, feel warm and cozy when they know that they're pre-provisioning for their retirement. Others feel quite uncomfortable because they can't touch the money. So, when you talk to your neighbour over the cubicle or a mate down at the bar about what you're doing with it, everyone has different biases and comfort levels and risk appetites. So just take that into account. If you don't know which one to do them all.
Equal weight. Absolutely. Love it.
So, but mate, as I say, I think we can go on for hours on this, but I just wanted to, really come out to put that one to bed. Bit of housekeeping. We've got 2 big webinars coming up at the end of the month. Yourself with Jeremy and Jack on the property mortgage side, and then also you're a busy boy, and then you also got Jason Stotch, from Upturn Advisory, talking about financial considerations for US-based expats. So
That's right.
Yep. And I'll put the link below to the events page. You guys can go and select there. Don't be a stranger. Come along. These sort of things, even if you can't attend it live, these are always live, but if you can't attend it live, still register, because a recording will be sent out to you as well too.
Exactly right. And I mean, the US one will be good. We'll be doing, that's a 2-parter. And for those that listen that are actually in Australia, US citizens, it actually applies to you as well, because you've got the same problems that Australian expats have over in the US. Yeah. All to do with the IRS, that bastard.
They're amazing beasts, aren't they? They're just such lovely folks. So I'm sure they're on everyone's Christmas card list. So, mate, let's leave it there. We'll wrap it up and see you on the next episode.
Sounds good. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you on the next episode.
Mate. Take care.